Welcome to Inside City Hall. I'm your host, Mayor Daryl Seymore, and our guests today are Paul Watson, Assistant County Manager, and Mary Springer, Emergency Management Director, both from Navajo County. Welcome, Paul.
Hey, thank you. Welcome.
Welcome, Mary.
Thank you, Mayor.
Glad to have you guys with us today.
Glad to be here.
We've had a little bit of excitement, a little bit of challenges and things going forward. You know, one of the things that was brought up at one of our community meetings was about information. And Mary, I know that's your strong suit with the county, is getting information out, incident information in a timely manner. Share with us, when this fire broke out, some of the information that we had going forward, what we have in place and what we can improve upon.
Well, interestingly enough, I think I said this at the community meetings, I was actually meeting with the fire chiefs from the different districts, and Chief Savage from Timber Mesa was the one missing. He was actually at the fire, and the first posting on 311info.net was a picture of that fire even before noon that day. So, I mean, that's how quickly we tried to get information out to the public with what little bit we knew. So 311info.net, 311, the phone center, we stood that up immediately. But that is a limited, we have people taking phone calls, we have 12 seats. And Apache County's very good neighbor stood that call center up for us. So initially that is what we used to try and get the word out, get information out
there. And I think, you know, for the most part, the reports were great, the information that comes. And one of the things that's hard is when you have an incident like this, there's official information, and then there's information that's not official, and then there's information that sometimes that's well elaborated upon. I'll put it at that. But, you know, a Facebook is not really a great information as far as factual all the time, especially when it first breaks. And I will even say sometimes our newspaper, the information that they had out, when they said that the fire was 50 miles from Shola, then they said the fire was 20 miles from Shola. Now, if I'm reading that, the fire just traveled 30 miles, okay?
Yeah.
And so that puts my fear and my anxiety up quite a bit, when in fact now the fire was probably started about 20 miles from Shola.
Correct. And just a note on Facebook, if we post officially on Navajo County Emergency Management, as do the city of Shola has their official Facebook, that's something you can count on. But the posts that come afterwards, some of that is just not factual.
Right. And, you know, tell us a little bit about the volume of the calls that came in, if you could, a little bit, and a little bit about your organization. You have 12 people manning the phones, but they're not paid, they're just volunteers, is that correct? Or some of them may be?
Correct. As I told you early on Wednesday, we knew things were looking pretty bad and that fire was moving quickly. So we called Apache County, who are our neighbors, and their emergency management set up the call center. And so they were manned by volunteers and some paid staff through Apache County. And they worked tirelessly to answer those phone calls. And I think at the peak, they were over 2,000 calls a day, and just nonstop for 12 hours a day.
That's a lot of calls. That's a lot to deal with. And they did a fantastic job, and I just want you to know that we appreciate the service that was rendered by those volunteers and those people as well in your organization.
Thank you.
It was
and
great.
Just a note, prior to that, all of our dispatches on the mountain were flooded. So Shola Dispatch, Pinetop Lakeside, Snowflake, Taylor, the Sheriff's Office, all those calls start going to the 911. People just get really anxious when they see smoke. So we knew that we had to set up a call center early to help alleviate some of that traffic off the dispatchers. So I have to commend your dispatch staff all over the mountain for doing such a phenomenal job with what they had to deal with.
Paul, share with us a little bit about the role that the county took place in information, dealing with the press, some of the roles of Adam Wolf and different things here in the county.
Yeah, Adam is fairly new to the county, and he is our communications director for Navajo County. And we felt like it was important that we get a face out to the media as soon as possible to try and give as accurate information as possible. And Adam was that guy. He was the connection between the incident command, the emergency command center we had at Navajo County, the information command center we had. I mean, he was kind of the one to coordinate all of those communications that were taking place and then present that information to the public and to the media.
Okay. Do we have anything for improving our communication through the county that we're working on, or we have, going forward, some things that we kind of have on the horizon?
Well, I'll break that into two parts. The first part, as far as communication on emergency events, there's always room for improvement, and particularly when you have an event that not only crosses multiple agency, but also crosses multiple jurisdictions. And this event took place on the White Mountain Apache tribe on their lands, and yet it impacted the communities adjacent to the tribe as well. So that created some challenges, but I think as we worked through it, we made sure that we got everybody included in the communications that were taking place, and I think after a few small bumps in the road, we were able to make that happen pretty well.
Right. Yeah, I think when it first broke out, we were struggling a little on that, but like we say, what are we communicating? We're trying to get our hands on what's happening first. Right. But then once we had the Incident 1 command, it's at that point things got really good. The communication got great, I would say, as far as people knowing what was going on, roles, everybody's position, and it was good. But the first night or so, there was a little bit of chaos of control of who's making the decisions, what decisions need to be made, and at the same time the information from the right people telling us what was going on. But it's like anything, it takes a little while to get all that worked out. And I think there's some things that we can learn from that going forward, putting certain people in position so that we have that information. Getting that out to the public, I think that's the biggest concern and our improvement. But I think, like you said, knowing where to go, knowing who to call first, the Navajo County response that they have that they can sign up for. Do you want to touch on that a little bit?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, that, to me, that was one of the big critical pieces in this whole event, is having people signed up on Ready Navajo County. And I touted it at the public meetings, and I'm still doing it today. We can't alert you if we can't reach you, and that's really the message. And if somebody hasn't signed up for that already, they need to, because wildfires is one of the events. We have floods, we have other incidents that happen in the county. We had a missing boy just last night. We probably woke a few people up sending an alert, but if it was your child and they were missing,
Sure.
You'd want to know about it, and you'd want to know that people are doing everything they can to help. So Ready Navajo County, either sign up on the county website, or they can call us, or visit local fire stations and police stations.
Right.
We'll all help them sign up.
I didn't even know that I was signed up in my company, in my business, but I came in Thursday morning and took some message calls, and sure enough, I had an alert there on the phone, and I don't know who in my office, but it was great. Although I was able to do that, had I not had the position that I hold in the community, it would have been nice to have that. I had the information going forward with that.
Yep.
So Paul, what else is new at the county as we wrap this up a little bit? As far as the fire, as far as transitioning now, share with us a little bit how the fire's transitioned from our command back down to the BIA a little bit.
Yeah, so the Type 1 Incident Command team is in that process, I believe, yesterday, and kind of finishing that up today, from what I understand, that they transition that back to the local agencies, and in this case it is the BIA and their resources that are now taking over that incident. One final thought on communications. There's the person-to-person communications. There's also the communications infrastructure. And one of the things that we are working on prior to this event and has been reiterated through this event is the fact that we need to improve our communications in this area as far as broadband and capacity and access. And so we recently received a grant from Arizona Commerce Authority to help us identify what are the current assets that we have in place, what are the weaknesses for those assets, and where can we make improvements. And so we're hopeful over the next few months to really be diving into our communications network and look at what we can do to improve that.
And I think it's important for the citizens to know that we had a meeting probably 4 months or 6 months ago where we had the mayor from Payson up, and we talked about what we could do to take those links that we have and increase our broadband in this community, so that when we do have fiber optics cut by either Cable One or Frontier, that we have a back loop that keeps us informed.
Right.
And I know just with some work that we've done recently here in the community, those lines get cut, and it could put businesses out of work, communication out, people's cell phones go down. But with that, we still go back to the old, there's still nothing much better than the old CB radio ham guys there, you know what I mean, with everything we have going forward. But sometimes those things are still basic, and they play a vital role in the communication. If we lose everything, we do have that backup there.
Yeah.
Yes.
We appreciate you heading that up, because I know you're taking that with the county and working with that as we get better. And so the answer is yes, we are improving, and yes, we do have things in the future that will be better. But as everybody has a microphone today to toot their own horn and things, that's where we have to urge the people to be careful about the information. One, that you're sending, that it needs to be responsible, and two, what we're sending is responsible. And we appreciate, the work that's gone forth in this incident here, Mary.
Yep.
It's any final thoughts?
Well, one thought, and it's a little bit off of the communications, but fire-wise, we have been touting that. I know there's a event planned for July 30th at Pinetop Fire Station on Buck Springs Road, and we really do encourage all residents to attend that. It's really important because we do live in a wildland urban interface. So communication, come out and learn about Firewise.
Right. I mean, I've had people call and say, I got trees around my house. All of this, all the time is happening, that we have to be careful of what we're doing. I mean, what did people do when they were getting ready to evacuate to their homes? Those are things that need to be kept up all the time.
Yes.
Things. Paul, any final comments?
No, I agree. I think we ought to take this event and learn our lessons as we have from the Rodeo Chetaskai and the Wallow fires. And we live in an area where we need to be diligent about keeping up our properties and making our communication links so that we're aware when things do happen.
That's great. Well, thanks so much today. Appreciate you.
All right, thank you.
Mary,
Thank
thank
you.
you. Stay tuned for the next segment of Inside City Hall, where we'll have Chief Brian Savage from Timber Mesa Fire and Chief Joe Shelley from Shoalo Police Department. So stay tuned. Welcome back to Inside City Hall. Our next guests are Chief Brian Savage from Timber Mesa Fire and Medical, and Chief Joe Shelley from the Shoalo Police Department. Welcome, Chief.
Thank you.
Chief.
Thank you.
How are you?
Doing well.
Well, we've got good news. We're here. Everything's there. We're wiser, smarter, and there's a few things we learned and will continue to learn through this fire that we just had. Share with us a little bit about your observation of how everything went. I'd just kind of like each of you to kind of just give us an overall perspective of how you feel everything went.
Go ahead.
Okay. I'm very pleased with the local coordination between public agencies. I don't think it could have gone a whole lot better. Certainly I know that the community out there would like more information early on, and unfortunately in those first hours and first days of the event, there just isn't a lot of information to give. The community responded the way that we would like to see for the most part. They were ready to evacuate if need be, and fortunately we never had to evacuate the mountain. So I'm very pleased with the interagency coordination and ultimately the results of all of the effort of the last 2 weeks.
Great. Chief?
Same sentiments across the board for the law enforcement community. The amazing response that we got, voluntary response from all the agencies around us worked out very, very well for us. In fact, we had at one point where too many law enforcement officers, we had to back them down a little bit and kind of spread them out, get ready for the longer haul that we thought we were going to get into. And in fact, we ended up going 2 weeks long. So just kudos to everybody that really came out of the woodwork for us, and working with the fire departments, working with Wildland Fire. It was just it was a great experience for me, and it was a very, very good experience for the community overall, and seeing how they responded as well.
You know, because as we go to these areas that get a little bit tense or quite tense, we learn a lot about ourselves and about our community, and areas that we need to improve on, and areas that, in the event that this had gone to a full-blown evacuation, what we could be ready for in the future if it gets to that point. You know, as we've been sitting here talking, Brian, you kind of shared with us that we've had a scenario where we kind of practiced or did a dummy scenario if there was a fire close like this one. Why don't you explain that a little bit?
That was actually 3 years ago. We had set up, at that time it was Lakeside Fire Department, the station there in Lakeside, a large gathering of all the fire agencies and the law enforcement agencies in the area, and we ran this exact scenario. So a fire that starts on Fort Ridge, we all know where that's headed. It's going to come uphill, it's going to run the drainages, and it's going to come into town. Now, collectively, as a group of public safety professionals, how are we going to handle that? What are we going to do? And I think a lot of those kind of lessons learned from that dry run were applied in this scenario, and the outcome was very good.
No, it's great. You never can practice the real thing perfect, but it's great to have some understanding and things that we have going forward. Let's take this and talk a little bit about, you know, people were saying at our public meetings, even if we get to the point of evacuation, what's going to happen, and help us understand those management action points that are in place there, what takes place to make sure that we do go to the next level, decisiveness. But how would a full-blown evacuation unfolded? What would have been kind of the orderly way that we'd have tried to move people in, and at what point would everybody have been notified, even if they didn't get something through a text message or TV or radio? That had been a knock on the door possibly.
Well, I think, and I'll answer this portion from the law enforcement aspect of it, because we're the ones doing the evacuation. And I know fire would come in there and back us up, or actually help fight the fire so that we can get most of the people out of here. And that was one of the questions that came up, excuse me, in the community meeting was, you know, where are we going? What are our evacuation points? And we couldn't honestly answer that because we didn't know the way the fire was going to react. So that's where the firefighters and police working together, we can figure out a plan and all our contingencies of where we're going to have to amass the number of people to start the evacuation from that place forward. In this case, Pinetop Lakeside was one of the areas it was going towards, and Honda McNary, and working with Chief Webster out of White River. It was great to see him and us, and with Chief Sergeant, all working together saying, this is where we're going to go. Casey Clark bringing all his people in from the Sheriff's Office. So we would start there and move our way forward. Different things that we put out there real early on was to get those information points out to people and say, please sign up for these things so that we can get this out to you. Whether it was the radio, whether it's going to be television, whether it's going to be print media, obviously all online, obviously text messages going out. The reverse 911, we're moving to Ready Navajo County now, where that gets out countywide. Everybody knows it's coming. But at the very least, the officers are going to be in those areas, and they're going to basically, I know that fire was going to stage in those areas for us in case something did happen a little bit ahead of schedule. But we'd have plenty of time to get in there and knock on doors, door to door, and basically tell people this is what's going on, and we're evacuating at this point. So early on, the management action points, or the trigger points that we're talking about before, but the management action points were set up to where we had a little bit of time, 4 to 6 hours, sometimes more. Again, fire, I'm going to defer to him on the fire side of it, but it acts so strangely, and I'm learning all of this new things. So when I was listening to him, we had 4 to 6, 8 hours or so to where we could get everybody together and start moving people out in an orderly fashion, in a safe fashion, and get them out of the city in different evacuation routes. But we just didn't know which evacuation routes we were going to use at that point. So officers were going to come to everybody's house, knock on the door. Deputies, we had volunteer posse members, we had our senior patrol, we had game and fish out there, Arizona DPS was out there, the state troopers were out there, different agencies from all over the different counties were in, St. John's, Snowflake PD, Pinetop Lakeside. all of them came together, Holbrook, Winslow, and it was neat to see all of them come together, and that's who would be knocking on your door. So that's how it was supposed to work.
I mean, it's fantastic. We have, 30 to 35 police officers, but the numbers of what we had for law enforcement officers became almost tenfold by the time, every agency lend help and everything that was happening. So that's great. But you guys wouldn't be knocking on doors because you'd be staging, the fire.
Generally speaking, we're going to be engaged in the firefight at that point. I think it's important to talk a little bit about a couple of things. One, and Chief Shelley mentioned it, 311info.net is our best system right now, that reverse 911 system to get information out. It'll come to you in whatever form that you request it, be that a cell phone call, a text message, an email, whatever it is that works best for you. And it's a relatively reliable system. I'm signed up. I get notifications all the time when things are going on in the county. Whether we've had tornado warnings and a variety of other things that come out that way. So it really is an effective system, and that is probably our best initial push to get information out to everybody, and then followed up by law enforcement going door to door in those neighborhoods. I was impressed with the law enforcement plan, not only in the numbers of officers that they were able to assemble, but they broke down the area into zones, and they knew if the fire comes here, and I don't mean to talk about your piece either, but if the fire comes here, we're going to evacuate this zone first and then work our way out from there, type of thing. And so they had a good plan in place, and we did have the management action points were from the city of Show Low, from right at the rim. It was about 9 miles away. From Pinetop Lakeside, kind of the Rainbow Lake area, you were looking at about 8 miles away. So when it got to that point, the fire incident management team had an opportunity then to determine, okay, how quickly is it moving? Do we have a handle on it? And do we need to order evacuations? And then we had 4, 6, 8 hours of time to work with, depending on the scenario. So it was good.
I think it's interesting, during the Rodeo Chetasky fire, we had 60 and 260 were routes that were both closed, and they were not options, but yet we were still able to get most people out of our community within about a 5-hour window. And so with this fire threat, we still had one more viable exit of town, and we probably had a little slower area because the wall of that fire was maybe not quite as wide as what it was at the other fire.
I think our citizens need to understand that we live in the mountains, and I know that, no kidding, right? We all understand that piece. But wildfire is going to be a threat for us every summer. That's part of where we live. With that being said, there are several educational programs out there that we have. Ready, Set, Go is one of those. And that talks about being ready prior to the fire, having your stuff, if you will, your family, your things in order, and then being prepared to evacuate when you need to. If there is a neighborhood association, a group of folks out there that need that presentation, they can feel free to get in contact with us, and we'll send somebody out there. The other piece, though, is kind of the FireWise piece, and that is making sure that our community is resilient, that we don't have massive overgrowth going on in our yards, in our neighborhoods, where the fire is going to come through here and just consume everything.
Right.
It gives us a fighting chance as firefighters if the citizens have done that work in advance. When the fire gets here, we are more able to get in there and do something about it. If it is overgrown the way that it is in some areas, there's not much we can do.
Right. Yeah, when you get those canopy fires going and back and forth, and there's a lot of areas within our own community that everybody can work on and be a little bit more able getting those gutters clean. There's a lot of things you can do on a regular basis. Really you should have a destination point come May 1st of where you've talked about your family or where you want to go. And the evacuation centers are great for a lot of people, and that's where they will go and need to go. But there's also a lot of other areas that people have relatives that they're going to go visit. They're going to go to those different areas as well, and that's good. But we have to understand all of our options ahead of time. Instead of just all of a sudden, what am I going to do? Exactly. What are you going to take? Have maybe labels or lists that you have already made up. Grab these 5, 6, 7 things and be ready to go. Some people will load everything they have, and they'll want to take that too. Those are different options, but everyone
definitely get those things that you can't replace. Those important documents, family photos, pets, kids.
Right.
Get those out, and the rest of it we'll do our best for.
Yeah, your medications are very true. And it's just a little thing. You don't start running with your car halfway full of gas through the summer, and little things there. So we saw the lines hit real fast at the gas stations and everything else as soon as that happens. Well, I appreciate both of you. I got to know you each a little better through this fire, and it was great with the different things, and we appreciate the service that both of your agencies rendered and what we do as a team here on the mountain. It's one of those great things. We have to step back and realize this is now our 4th major wildfire that we've had in the last probably 15 years. But one of the great statistics that we have is we have not lost a life, to my knowledge, either fighting or defending or from personnel in any capacity on these fires. And I think that's something that we want to keep that record always and be grateful for it, that is the one thing that we have replaced other items that have been burned, but we have not had to lost a life in this fighting. So appreciate it.
Well said.
Anything else you guys want to share?
Appreciate you having us and appreciate the support the city's given us throughout this process.
Thank you.
Kudos goes out to the community and all the leadership that we had throughout this entire event. Did a great job.
Good. Well, thank you for joining with us today on Inside City Hall, and I hope you have a great day.